Finding this from among his belongings, the funeral of my grandson, who passed away from heart disease. Written in clumsy handwriting on the small envelope handed to me was testament. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope, revealing words of gratitude to his mother and grandmother. I read through it, tears streaming down my face. But it ended with a shocking revelation. No, everything written here is just a child's lie. It's all nonsense. A man shouted in panic. The people around him showered him with scorn as his lies were exposed by the will. My name is Mary. I lost my husband a few years ago, and now I live with my only son, John, his wife, Melissa, and our grandson, Tom. Granny, I'm home. Welcome back. Wash your hands. I've prepared some snack. As both John and Melissa work, it's my responsibility to take care of Tom when he comes home from school. John works for a major trading company and has busy days. After finishing her part-time office job, Melissa comes home in the evening to prepare dinner with me, as it's our daily routine. While cooking together in the kitchen, I noticed Tom, who was watching TV in the living room, looking unwell. "Hey, Tom, are you feeling all right?" Hurriedly approaching him, Melissa noticed his discomfort. I feel a little pain in my chest." Seeing my grandson tilt his head and clutch his chest, I had a bad feeling about it. "Hey, Melissa, I'm getting worried. Maybe we should take him to the hospital tomorrow." "Yeah, Tom, let's skip school tomorrow and see a doctor." When John returned home, we informed him about Tom's chest pain, but he laughed it off, saying it was exaggerated. I sometimes get chest or stomach pains too, probably just bumped into something while playing. Both Mom and Melissa are worriers. I couldn't help but feel disappointed by his indifferent remarks. Despite what John said, neither Melissa nor I could ignore Tom's abnormally pale complexion and persistent pain. The next day, we made an appointment with a nearby clinic and visited. "Mr. Ma'am, there might be a possibility of a serious illness. I'll write a referral, so let's get him checked at another hospital right away." After being referred, we took Tom to a university hospital, where detailed examinations of his chest were conducted, resulting in a diagnosis of severe heart disease. Esquimazing given a year at most, everything turned dark upon hearing the prognosis. "Marxies, she's still in elementary school. How could this happen?" Melissa took a leave of absence from work thereafter and started accompanying Tom at the hospital where he was admitted, alternating with me. In contrast, John, while showing concern for Tom's health, often came home late, citing busy work schedules. There were times he didn't return for several days, claiming business trips. Normally, when you hear that your son's life expectancy is short, you would expect him to somehow adjust and make time for you, but Hiroyuki shows no sign of this. Upon returning home, occasionally, he often snapped at Melissa in a condescending tone. "Hey, is dinner ready yet? Seriously, you're so slow. I'm tired from work, so hurry up and prepare it." Ever passed his company. Melissa seemed noticeably thinner, perhaps from exhaustion from caregiving. John, oblivious to her condition, not only failed to notice but also found fault with her over trivial matters. While taking turns accompanying Tom at the hospital, household chores were inevitably neglected. Unable to predict when John would return, we couldn't even prepare ingredients in advance. So when we served simple meals, John would suddenly become furious. "What's with this half-assed cooking? Since you're at home, can't you make something decent? What's the point of taking time off work?" "Hey, no need to talk like that. I'm not taking a leave of absence for housework. It's for accompanying Tom." "It's okay, Mary. John must be tired from work, but still, there's no need for that tone. This is what I get when he comes home. Not only is the food bad, but can't he at least give me a shoulder rub or something to show appreciation? He really has no clue. My son's commanding tone, as if mocking, seemed like a different person from before. February and Helen in his wasn't like this before. What happened? He might be under stress from his busy job and our son's illness. But we're going through the same thing. In fact, since we have to witness Tom's deteriorating health almost every day, our mental burden is heavier. Hey, John, how about showing a bit more concern for Tom? You're always busy with work and never make it to the hospital, and maybe be a bit gentler with Melissa too. Mom, are you saying that too? Of course I'm worried about my son, but if Melissa isn't working, someone has to work to pay for the hospital bills, right? We couldn't retort to such a troublesome son. Amidst growing dissatisfaction with our son's attitude, Tom celebrated his 8th birthday. Although temporary home visits weren't allowed, we threw a small party in his hospital room. Happy birthday, Tom. You've been working hard with your medication and treatments every day. Here's your present. Handing Tom a large gift box, but his expression was somber. Thank you. Hey, where's Dad? Why doesn't he ever come to visit me? I thought he'd come today. With a pale face, Tom murmured sadly. Of course, I had informed John about today's birthday party in advance. Oh, that day's a business trip. I'll buy a gift, so just give it to him. Are you serious? Your own son is suffering from illness. Unable to bear his callous attitude anymore, Melissa, who usually endured, finally snapped at John with incredible fury. Is that topic again? Oh, I'm not feeling well. I'm not coming home today. With a sulking expression, John quickly left the house. I was fed up with his attitude of always running away when things got inconvenient. A few days after the birthday party, we were summoned by Tom's attending physician. His condition is worsening. Please make plenty of memories with your family while you still can. He won't be with us much longer. We broke down in tears before the solemn-faced doctor. We immediately called John to inform him of the situation. Shocked by his son's condition, he rushed to the hospital that day. Tom looked happy to see his father after a long time, but the words his father said to him were unbelievably insensitive. Long time no see, son. You'll gone soon, but it means you'll be free. I'll miss you when you're gone. He probably thought he was being encouraging, but Melissa and I hurriedly stopped John from speaking further. Hey, that's not the way to say it. Cut it out. Just get it out of here. With tears streaming down her face, Melissa ushered John out of the hospital room. John laughed it off as a joke, but his insensitive words were unforgivable. Tom looked bewildered by his father's words. I wonder if Dad won't be sad when I'm gone. I hugged him tightly, reassuring him. But from John's demeanor, I couldn't help but feel that there was hardly any affection left for Tom. A few days later, we were granted permission for Tom's first overnight stay. Home really is the best after all. In front of a jubilant Tom, both Melissa and I behaved cheerfully, making sure not to show any signs of sadness. We wanted to create as many happy memories as possible, at least until the end. That's why we think. However, despite our efforts, John's attitude at home remained unchanged, even though our son had returned. While he seemed to refrain from treating Melissa harshly in front of Tom, he still came home late and went on frequent business trips. Since that day when he uttered those insensitive words, Tom seemed to avoid his father as well. John, who seemed absent-minded even when at home, constantly looked at his smartphone screen and appeared to be in contact with someone day and night. Whenever the phone rang, he would always leave the room to talk in secret. Peeking at him to avoid being noticed, I saw him with an unprecedentedly sloppy and listless expression. "Hey John, who are you in contact with?" "Huh? It's just work-related calls." "But you didn't used to get calls every single day like this before." "Stop nagging, it's busy season now. So there's a lot to do and a lot of calls to make." His suspicious behavior prompted me to question him, but he always managed to evade it with his usual slippery manner. After returning from an overnight stay at home, Tom returned to the hospital, and then he expressed his wish to Melissa and me, saying, "I want to talk to Dad alone." Despite the terrible attitude he had been shown, he still longed for his father, it seemed. Touched by his earnest request, both Melissa and I agreed to his wish. When we informed John about it, he momentarily wore a reluctant expression, but eventually, perhaps unable to disregard the wish of his terminally ill son, he quietly visited the hospital room. We were curious about what they would talk about, so we left the room and waited in the hospital's waiting area. This was because Tom had asked him beforehand to leave the hospital room when John arrived, saying that it was a man-to-man talk. I wonder if he'll be okay, if he'll say something insensitive again like he did before. Yeah, and Tom is the one who wants to talk to his father. I wonder what he's talking about. Anxiously, we waited in the waiting room of the ward. After about 30 minutes had passed, John finally emerged from the hospital room. Well, he's quite the perceptive kid. Surprising, really. Right after leaving the room, John, inexplicably in high spirits, muttered to himself meaningfully. I didn't understand the meaning of those words. But John's expression was the same as it was during that phone call, sloppy and lacking any firmness. Tom's condition had been stable for a while, but suddenly we received a call from the hospital about a sudden change. Rushing to the hospital with Melissa, we tried to contact John on the way, but couldn't get through to him at all. It seemed like he had turned off his phone. When Melissa and I arrived at the hospital, Tom had already passed away. "Tom, why did you leave Mom behind?" Melissa clung to Tom's bed and cried. I stood there staring blankly at the sight. Why did an 8-year-old child have to die? In the end, we didn't receive any contact from John on that day. I wondered where he was and what he was doing, even though our son had passed away. I no longer had the energy to be angry. The next day, as we took Tom's body from the hospital and prepared for the wake at home, John finally came home and said he had to leave because he had another important business trip soon. I can't believe the nerve of him to prioritize work over his son's funeral at this stage of his life. What are you thinking? Your son is dead. I feel bad too, but I can't afford to lose time at work. However, no matter how much I questioned him, John seemed out of his mind and eventually just left. On the night of the wake, while taking turns keeping watch, we gazed at Tom's motionless face in the coffin. We just wanted to send him off to heaven with a peaceful all-night vigil. On the day of the funeral, despite the suddenness of it all, many relatives came to bid farewell. Among them, my own brother, Dominic, who had cherished Tom dearly while he was alive, was particularly deeply saddened. "Mary, you did well. It must have been tough." My brother offered words of consolation, then suddenly seemed to notice something and glanced around. "Anyway, why isn't Dad John here?" "He said he had to go on a business trip." As I said that, my brother Dominic's expression immediately turned grim. He's off on a business trip, even though his own son passed away. What's he thinking? Angry, my brother picked up his smartphone and started making a call somewhere. Hey, John, where are you right now? Is work more important to you than your own son's funeral? My brother's yelling echoed in the funeral hall. No, T, that's not it. I told Melissa and Mom that I'd be late for the funeral. He kept making excuses like that, but neither Melissa nor I had heard anything like that. Quit babbling and come here right away. John, who was originally not good at dealing with my brother Dominic, seemed to be affected by being scolded over the phone and rushed to the funeral hall a few hours later. Both are relatives, and I looked at John, who arrived late, with cold eyes. I couldn't help but feel irritated by my son's absent-mindedness, even though he was supposed to be the chief mourner. As I was about to voice my complaints, I noticed him holding his smartphone to his ear, apparently talking to someone. Who would have the audacity to call during a child's funeral? I thought to myself as I discreetly listened in, sorry for changing the plan, but I'll make it up to you next time. Yeah, I can't wait to see you soon too. His cheerful demeanor didn't match that of a father who had lost his child. Or Powards, what's going on? Who is he talking to? Yeah, now that the nuisance is gone, we can finally be together once we get divorced. I love you. The words "the nuisance is gone" made me doubt my ears. After ending the call and trying to return to the funeral hall, I hurriedly went back to avoid being caught eavesdropping. If he talks like that, it's probably another woman. I felt sick at the thought of the worst-case scenario. If it's just my misunderstanding, then it's fine. But if this prediction turns out to be true, I can't forgive him even if he's my own son. That's what I thought. After the funeral, while entertaining the relatives and mourners in the hall, John, who had callously rejoiced at his own son's death just a moment ago, remained unperturbed. As everyone reminisced about Tom in a solemn atmosphere, Melissa, who had been away from her seat, returned. Mary, please take a look at this for a moment. When I was organizing Tom's belongings, I found this. Melissa showed me something with a puzzled expression. It was a small envelope. It seemed to have come from the treasure chest that Tom had treasured. The envelope had the clumsy handwriting of a grade schooler, with the words "testament" written on it. Those words made my heart skip a beat. For an 8-year-old child to realize his own funeral and leave a message for someone after his death. Thinking about it, tears flowed from my eyes, which should have dried up long ago. When I received it from Melissa, I slowly read it aloud in front of the relatives. In Tom's will, he first expressed his gratitude to Melissa and me. He was happy that we visited him every day at the hospital, and he was able to persevere through his illness because we were there. Melissa broke down in tears. As I wiped away my tears, I continued reading. There was no expression of gratitude towards John until the end, but finally, towards the end of the will, there were the words to Dad. This is unbelievable. There, it was written that John had been cheating with a young woman for several years. This is how Tom found out about the affair. Before John's heart disease was discovered, there was an incident during his bath where his smartphone rang. When Tom, with the curiosity of a child, answered the phone, he heard a young woman's voice. Apparently, the woman didn't realize that someone else had picked up the phone, and she called John's name, expressing love for him and saying she wanted to see him again. Then she mentioned eagerly waiting for the day when John would divorce his wife and hung up. At that time, Tom didn't understand the significance of it, but as he grew older, he gradually came to understand that it might have been a call from John's mistress. Dad, I know. You're meeting a woman who isn't Mom, aren't you? That day, when Tom, speaking as a son, ushered us out of the room to leave John alone, he confronted John about the previous phone call where a woman's voice had called his name and said she loved him. He demanded an explanation, mentioning the previous missed calls and the affectionate tone he had heard. John panicked when confronted about his affair. What are you talking about? You don't have to hide it. Dad, you're popular with the ladies. I'm kind of impressed. What's she like? I want to meet her. Initially cautious that someone might find out about his affair, John became cheerful upon realizing that Tom wasn't interested in revealing the truth. He then began eagerly talking about his relationship with his mistress. There are many photos of you and the lady on Dad's smartphone. Please check them out. That's the evidence. That's how the will concluded. What? Oxmenic exclaimed in disbelief. The relatives were all murmuring in shock. John tried to flee from the scene in a panic, but Dominic grabbed his shoulder to restrain him and snatched the smartphone from John's hand. Give it back. This is all nonsense. Are you going to believe what a child says? You'll understand whether it's nonsense or not once you see this. Aita, in a hurry, operated the seized smartphone and let out a deep sigh as if he had found something. Take a look, he said, holding up the smartphone screen in front of us. There were numerous photos of John and the unknown young woman, just as Tom had described in his will, appearing affectionate together. There were even some suggestive ones that couldn't simply be dismissed as mere friendship. Indeed, John had been avoiding his sick son and meeting with other women while lying about work. You were talking to this woman on the phone earlier too. I heard everything. You said you finally got rid of the nuisance. Realizing that John had treated Tom as a nuisance, I, even though he was my son, felt angry. I can't forgive this to cheat and trample on me and Tom's feelings like. The relatives surrounding John began to shower him with reproaches. Despite John's frantic attempts to defend himself and make excuses, no one was willing to listen. I was thinking of breaking up with Melissa even before Tom got sick. And then when Tom got sick, if I had abandoned you guys at that time, wouldn't my reputation have suffered? I'm even paying for Tom's hospital bills. Isn't that enough? I felt like my blood vessels were about to burst from anger at my son's unbelievable words. Shut up, it's all about you. You should have been the one in the coffin. 6 weeks later, everyone present became witnesses, and with the unchangeable evidence of the smartphone data, John and Melissa ended up getting divorced. It's because you only cared about your son and neglected me. To John's repeated absurd excuses, Melissa, through a lawyer, demanded a much larger amount of compensation than usual. Even though he was my own son, I had had enough and I cut off all ties with John. Thrown out of our house, John apparently ended up moving in with his mistress. However, it turned out that his mistress was an industrial spy trying to steal confidential information from the major trading company where John worked. While dating John, she had apparently been able to extract important corporate secrets from him. Of course, the woman had no intention of staying with John from the beginning, and once he had served his purpose, John was easily discarded. As a result, confidential information leaked to a rival company, and John was fired from his job as a result of that responsibility. On the other hand, Melissa, who had been like a hollow shell for a while after losing Tom, recently returned to work after being on leave. Continuing to mourn like this forever would only make Tom laugh at me. Saying that, Melissa smiled with a look of relief. Using the grief of losing Tom as a springboard, It seems she is now more devoted to her work than ever before. After being abandoned by his affair partner, John, despite being disowned, came to rely on me. Since I had been blocking his calls on my smartphone, he came to my house, but I turned him away at the gate. Please, Mom, I'm your only family. After bringing unhappiness to both Tom and Melissa, how dare you say such a thing? Don't ever cross my threshold again. You're not my son anymore. John apologized while crying, but I could never forgive him, especially for Tom's Mary over here. When I arrived at the cafe where we had agreed to meet, Melissa, who had arrived earlier, noticed me and waved me over. Even after John and Melissa's divorce, we continued to meet like this frequently, going out for tea or outings. Several years had passed since then, and we were having tea with Melissa as usual. I have some good news to share with you today. I had a feeling it was good news. Since Tom passed away, I've been working hard at my job. And as a result, I've been recognized for my work and promoted to the first female management position in the company. Well, congratulations. It's good news for Tom. I think she really worked hard to become the first female manager in Melissa's company. And today, we plan to visit Tom's grave together after this. The sadness of losing Tom had not healed yet, but we wanted to live our lives firmly, not ashamed in front of him in heaven. That's what we thought.